What's going on, everybody? My name is Mark, and this is Christianity Unfiltered. Unfortunately, today we do not have our lovely co-host, Marcos. He got rushed on time with another important thing, but we do have the lovely guest of Anna. How are you today, Anna?
I'm good. I'm taking over for Marcos, and I'm completely taking his spot, right? He's off the team?
Maybe.
Off the team, Marcos. You're gone. No, I'm doing good. I am excited. This is exciting. I love this topic.
So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button and like down below for more of these amazing guests. We have multiple more to come. Unfortunately, the last few weeks we had another guest, but unfortunately with scheduling we couldn't get him on. But we do have the great Anna on this week. So Anna, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Anna. Right now I'm a barista, but I spent 2 years in the missionary world with YWAM, which is Youth of the Mission. If you do not know, I am somebody who wants to work in the human trafficking anti-industry. That's my goal. So this is a very passionate subject to me. You didn't introduce the subject, did you? Did I give it a spoiler? Sorry, guys.
It's all good.
It's all good.
You'll figure out quick enough. You know that I've said before that we were going to be talking about this subject, and well, she got the early booking, so.
I'm here. I worked in the red light districts in Latvia with an organization called Freedom 61. And they were this organization that worked on street ministry and also were working with talking to people that were selling and working on that. So I got a lot of experience there. And this is also something I think is very much on God's heart. So I'm excited.
Yes, and I heard that you said that you were with YWAM for a few years. How was that?
I was with YWAM for 2 years. It was amazing. I loved the experience. I thought I wanted to be a pastor, and then I got introduced to the missionary world, and now I'm like, well, why don't we just travel and talk about Jesus?
That's a good idea. I know YWAM sometimes only goes to one place, but sometimes has multiple locations. Where did you do the whole? I'm pretty sure they have like their training in Hawaii, and then you go out to Kuwait. Or
no, YWAM actually has 1,400 locations of training.
Geez. Okay.
So I was trained in Denver for both times, or for both years, and then I went with them to Greece to work with the refugees and to work in some homeless ministry there and do some street evangelism. And then I also worked in Latvia, like I said, with them.
Oh, okay. That's really cool. Like she said, we are going to be talking about the screen. Can you flip the screen for us? We have a lovely helper.
She's Christy. She's one of my best friends. She is here because I am
being a responsible adult.
And hello. You can edit things, right? I'm very awkward on camera.
And this will not be edited because we like a full conversation.
You like the full awkward conversation?
Yes, that's the point of a podcast. Well, who edits their podcast? Anyways. And by the way, I did want to mention before we get into the hard subject, because we should already be getting into it, but it's okay. Going forward, there will be a total of 4 videos a week going out. For those who love to watch these as a full unclipped podcast, that will be out as the number 1 video. And then we're going to have 3 different videos that are basically the podcast cut up into 3 different parts. For those of you who only like to watch 15 to 20 minute-ish videos. So yeah. But yes, like she said, we are going to be diving into the subject of sex trafficking. One of the most sometimes difficult, controversial, scary subjects to talk about. And on the side of that, we're going to be talking, our main focus is human exploitation and how God's opinion on that. So would you like to start us out, Miss Anna?
I would love to. I think for this conversation, I think it's important to have a biblical view of justice in general. So, because justice by its very concept, and this is something that was introduced to me in YWAM, because one of my leaders was insanely justice-minded, is that for every sin, there has to be an equal atonement. So, like murder, for example, it needed murder to equal it out, which sounds weird. But that's the entire concept of Jesus and him dying for our sins, is that was finally the punishment that atoned for all of his sins. And so when you have injustice, what you have is you have an action without equal consequence. And so you either have too much consequence and things are too harsh and the punishment's too severe, or you have too little consequence and there's no punishment. So there's kind of a different sense of justice through the Lord. And then exploitation is interesting because it usually revolves around like basically using somebody's weakness against them to get something from them. And it's inherently anti-God because it's selfishness. And the entire gospel is a testimony of unselfishness.
Right.
Yeah, so there's that. I think the important thing to remember about this subject is that it's not universally immoral. There's communities in Asia that believe that it's okay to sell your children, and they practice it. And even when offered an option out, they still go with it. There is child soldiers in Africa that's considered normal, and we have it here where a lot of times in the secular world, prostitution is okay and hookers are okay. So it's like this exploitation is very interesting because it's not considered immoral.
Right.
So,
and we are seeing, getting, as I am a very political mind, we are seeing that happen a lot on when it comes to immigration from the Latin America countries and Southern America countries up into America. A lot of the children are either sold to coyotes, which are basically like traffickers that help bring children from there up. And unfortunately, there's plenty of cases where they were abused on their way up, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
But luckily for multiple different administrations, but I'm going to hit on the one of most recent with President Trump. He, along with ICE, created Operation Talon, which was to basically help drive more importance to it when it came to the overall solving of sex trafficking and human trafficking. And then there's other executive orders that he signed, one in 2017, Executive Order 13773, which basically was with transnational, was being more enforceful when it came to preventing international trafficking. And then also there was 13903 in January of 2020, where it was combating human trafficking and online child exploitation in the United States. So we have that in multiple places, or we have that within the government, but in my mind, and I think as well as your mind, is that there's not enough being done to help solve this issue.
I think the problem for me is that A, there's not enough being done, but B, it's also, this is not a widely discussed topic. Like, you know about it, you know it's bad, but it's not discussed. Like, for example, for you, for instance, so I am in this world because that's the field of which I have chosen to do my ministry in, and I learned about that. But like, what information did you know about trafficking and exploitation before this conversation, if you don't mind me asking? Like, what was your scope of information?
Other than, like I said, the few things that I've learned via searching through executive orders and seeing different things happening through the U.S. Marshal system, where they'll go in places like North Carolina and Florida, and getting these big trafficking rings dealt with and saving 25 children or 38 children, seeing these different spots. But obviously there's the obvious where you see hearing about these cool houses that are meant to help those that are surviving trafficking or survivors of trafficking and stuff like that.
So what's radical is that you have more information than most of the population. Even if you don't understand the full scope of it, you have more information than most of the population. Most people do not know of the organizations in their cities. Most people do not know about the laws that are being passed or what's being they don't have an understanding, because this topic isn't talked about except for select days when we try to do fundraising. And I think that's a part of the issue is it's considered, I think especially in America, we consider this another world issue. We consider this Asia's issue or Africa's, or, oh, that's only in Europe, prostitution, all these things, but it's actually happening in America, and it's happening prevalently. Like you brought up immigration, and that's an amazing thing, because 25% of human exploitation, human trafficking really is out of this country. It's from out of this country. And so what we have going on there is people are promising them the American dream. People are promising them, I will take your kid and I will get them citizenship. I will take your kid, I will get them to a better life. And then the kid gets hurt and the parents are left without. Like, it's complete and utter evil in its concept.
Right. And we're also seeing through what seems to be trying to be covered up, but hopefully isn't covered up for much longer, is videos where you have reporters going into the holding cells down there, and they're just shoving children in there, and not really like helping the children out, and all they're giving them is space blankets and like granola bars, and there should be more done for these children.
And that's a problem we've seen across multiple administrations. Like
Exactly.
and I think that speaks to an inherent problem in America, that it's bigger than one man, it's bigger than one woman, that this is a problem
Exactly.
in America.
And unfortunately, for those that enjoy, well, I don't know if it's an enjoyment to them, but physically or financially, it's an enjoyment to them when they can make huge amounts of money off of doing what they're doing, in what some people would find, like you said, that it looks like it's not immoral.
No, it's not.
For some situations, but others, when you're a Christian, would look at it being like, this is totally wrong, and this should not be happening at all.
Well, that's the interesting thing about human exploitation, I think, and that's why is that it's almost like immorality is on a scale. Because the idea of a child slave will make you cringe. The idea of a child being a soldier makes you want to cry, and we weep about it. But then you will go and you will buy products from like H&M, from Forever 21, that notoriously do not fund workers well, do not secure safe working environments. That is a form of human exploitation, and yet we don't bat an eye. And it's almost like a sliding scale of horror. And I think that's why it's such an important topic, because it's what's the immoral, what's the wrong.
Right, exactly. So what would you say our spiritual role as Christians are to help not only get the word out more on it, but even help straight deal with the problem?
Yeah. I think when you start looking at the spiritual role, I think we have to remember, we're made in the image of Christ. We're made in the image of Christ, and we're meant to embody the image of God. And one of my favorite verses in the Bible passages, Isaiah 61, which talks about, I was sent to free the captive, I was sent to proclaim liberty, I was sent to give them all the crowns and all these things. This is the passage that Jesus himself quotes in the temple in the Gospels, when he says, I'm here to proclaim liberty to the captives. And when you have to remember that was Jesus's mission, and that was where he was going, that is supposed to be ours too. It's one of his main ways of loving was to free the enslaved, whether you are spiritually enslaved due to sin or things like that, and that's why the gospel's there, or you're physically enslaved. And so I think our spiritual role as Christians, you have to remember that this is your problem. I think a lot of times, especially in the modern American church, we have this idea where we make our prayer life about us. We make our worship time about us, and we forget intercession, and we forget the fact that God's heart is also for people that are not you. And it's an interesting concept, because a lot of times we don't pray for other people. We don't, and we have that responsibility. We have that responsibility to pray. We have that responsibility to intercede. And so I think one of our spiritual roles is to remember that it's your kingdom come, your will be done. It's God's kingdom. Right. And God's kingdom is not just for me. It's not just for my comfort or my security. It is for the man sitting in a worker field in Africa. It's for the person in Canada that's being exploited. It's not just for me. And so my prayer time should not just be about me. And I think a spiritual role you have to remember is that you are meant to be a covering for your brothers and sisters. If there is a believer in China that is not being treated fairly, and yet they believe in God and they are doing the will of Christ, the Bible says that they are your brother and sister. If your brother was hurting, would you be apathetic? Would you pretend it didn't exist? And so I think that is a very big spiritual role, is carrying the burden for your brother and interceding. I think you also have to, I think we fall into this trap that prayer does nothing. And we have this idea that prayer is meaningless or that it's nice and it's pretty, but prayer changes things. The will of God is to move. And sometimes he just needs you to open a door, and he just needs you to invite the Spirit in, and he just needs you to pray. I was in Greece, and I remember Greece was insanely dark, and it's, for me personally, just a lot of just sin and a lot of demonic activity. And I remember thinking to the Lord, I was like, God, if I just sat on a hill and prayed, what could you do? And he began to speak to me about what could happen. What could happen if I just prayed? What could happen if I just loved people? And so I think also one of the things we have to remember in loving people is our language. We have to watch how we speak about people. We have to watch what chains we bind someone in, because you can pray, and if you're praying, that's amazing. Please don't get me wrong. That is amazing. But if you are praying for somebody and you are interceding, but then you go with your friends and you are binding people in word curses of like how you speak about immigrants, how you speak about prostitutes, how you speak about children in other countries, this idea of like they're barbaric or they're unsavable or it's not my issue, like, or you call them stupid or those things, like it's cursing them. And I think we need to remember that that's God's love, and that's who in the Lord, his heart is for them. And so I think the biggest spiritual things I would say for a Christian is you need to intercede and you need to watch what you say to people, because that's God's love. And I don't think we do enough spiritually. Because this is seen as missionary work, not church work, if that makes sense.
So we should, other than like, obviously, like you said, being less judgmental and less, better at using our tongues for prayer to help them.
The Bible says that there's life and death in the tongue.
Right. So trying to think here.
I think there just needs to be a spiritual responsibility for your brother and sister. I think that's the biggest thing.
So is that how the church could speak more about the subject, or is that just other than that's our spiritual role, how could the church be better at
so I think
speaking on the subject?
I think the church in specifics, I think that comes down to really the church needs to take responsibility for this. That it's not a faraway issue. For me personally, outreach is a very big thing, and outreach in your community, because in the area that we live in, there are at least 4 organizations in Sacramento, Rockland, that are actively working to stop human trafficking in this area and and the church should be partnering with them. Also, we need to be talking about it. Not just, I remember one time, the only time it ever gets mentioned at church is when they are asking for an offering for it. And that's good, but that also kind of sucks in my opinion.
Right.
Because it should be talked about more. This justice side should be talked about more. And it's not a political pin of oh, this person's doing this or oh, that person's doing that. It's a actual issue that's hurting people. So I think it should be talked about more. But also, I think the mission trips that we go on as a church, yes, it's good to go build houses. Yes, it's good to go feed people, but partner with organizations that are doing justice work in the area that you're going to. Don't just start new justice work, if that makes sense. Help build up what's already there.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you brought up that there's 4 different organizations. And obviously, I think off the top of my head, Sacramento is known as one of the biggest sex trafficking hubs in all of the United States, or something along those lines.
We're on the West Coast, so it really San Francisco is one of the drug hubs, because if you think about it, what comes in from San Francisco? Asia, India, Africa,
right.
Where are the hubs? And so California is one of the biggest ones, and so is Sacramento.
Right. Do you know off the top of your head what these different organizations are, so people can look into them more? And
Courage House Worldwide, if you live in Sacramento, is really good. Also, we have an organization called AIM, and they're amazing. We also have Weave. We also have something called Sacramento Together, and they are put in place to work with organizations like the police, schools, to help stop human trafficking. Now, if you do not live in Sacramento, what's another one? Weave is in Sacramento. There is also something called Adaptive Ops. They are a small team that goes in and rescues women and children and stuff like that. There is many organizations. If you live in Lafayette, Freedom 61 is one. I know that. But there's a lot. I think you would find it astounding if you just went and researched what was in your area, because they're hidden. They're not trying to be flashy. No one wants to be known as the people that are harboring trafficking victims, because that's how you get attacked. So just go look.
Right. And if you guys want to know more, I'll definitely try to see if any of those have websites or anything like that. I'll link them down below in our description for the video. So what physically do you think we should be doing, like, other than, like we said, going on trips that are partnered with? Is there any way, because I know that looking into it, but also watching some different documentaries around Indigenous people, Native American people, there's a huge problem in their culture where a lot of their children and ladies are being abducted and put into slavery or found dead, and certain things like that. What's the best? Is there a role that within maybe our households that we need to be better at for trying to protect on that end, or what do you think?
I think specifically if we're talking in the house and especially with your loved ones, I think honestly information's some of the best weapons. If your child, like, I remember having this conversation with somebody today about using correct anatomical terms with children, because we don't. Am I allowed to say vagina?
It's an open podcast.
Okay.
Vagina,
I just said
that's
it.
not a curse word. So,
one of the problems is that especially with people that are grooming or predators, especially if we're talking about children, because I'll probably just go up in age, is using anatomical terms. So that way you don't have a child saying, this guy gave me, like, I just make eye contact with Chrissy. We don't have somebody confusing terms and then a child trying to tell us something, but they can't tell us something. Teaching your teenagers about safe online internet things, like teaching people how to be safe on the internet. Do not go meet up with random Tinder guys. I'm going to be honest with y'all. Don't take a random job application that's promising way too much money for the position that you are being offered. Teach your children, teach your peers this practical steps. Also, I think I think everyone needs to take personal responsibility for what's going on, because it's not just sex trafficking, it's also labor practices. It's also, there are people in houses right now in America that are being kept in America as workers without pay. They're holding on to their passports, they're holding on to their immigration, they're not letting them go home, and it's happening. And what the biggest thing that everyone recommends is that if you see something, report something. Even if you don't even know. If you're not sure, report it. Teach your kids to be on the watch. Teach your kids to be mindful of someone saying, oh, my mom can't leave the house. My mom can't, like this. And I think especially if you work in the nursing sector, if you work in the medical sector, if you work in the lawyer sector, be educated on what are the signs. I think teachers also need to be very educated on what are the signs of grooming, because it happens a lot to kids.
Right.
And we're covering for them.
It's obviously due to the pandemic, the schools have had to been closed for a certain amount of time. And I wish, as they were able to figure things out within a few months, I wish things would have opened up quicker. But I know that unfortunately schools provide a lot of things for children, such as meals, but also as either counseling for mental things that happen in the house. A lot of schools help with diagnosing illnesses and stuff like that, or even possible abuses that happen within the home. And unfortunately, a lot of that probably was either undetected or unclaimed during the pandemic, because you see that happening a lot every year for students. So,
I think one of the biggest problems that came out of the pandemic, not just the schools, but was the rise in pornography. Like, that's the rise in, like, there was an increased spike in Pornhub views. There was increased spike and people ordering sex, like that was, people were stuck in their houses and that was considered okay. And pornography, unfortunately, is one of the biggest contributors to this industry because it teaches you that people are commodity. And also one of the natures of pornography is that it does support human trafficking. They did a poll of 900 trafficking victims, and over half of them said that they had been forced to do like pornography videos. And so it's actually feeling it. So, by the way, if you're still watching pornography, who's ever listening, please stop. Like, not just for the side effects of your brain, but also it really does support human trafficking. And it also, right now, like this is specifically an issue. I don't know if you guys have heard anything about this, but right now there's an increased rise in child pornography. Like there's an increasing demand for it because one of the natures of perversion is that the more you watch, the more desensitized you become to it. And so what you have going on is that we are basically creating commodity for children, and nobody voluntarily gives their children to that. So what you have is you have trafficking. So please stop watching pornography in case anyone's listening. Please stop.
Right. And unfortunately, through some political, but a lot of people just promoting it, sex work is becoming more and more of a trend for well-paying. Like just look, OnlyFans wasn't a thing 3 years ago, and I know you guys, I've seen the hate on other videos, and you guys are probably sending, even though we're talking about a really good thing, you'll probably send a lot of hate my way when I say this. OnlyFans is not a way to make good money. You're making dirty money. Well, legitimately making dirty money.
I think
there's some times when people, I know that some people use it for like my art, my clean videos, my things like that, and I get it. It's kind of like a Patreon, but if you're gonna use it like a Patreon, why don't you just use it why don't you just use Patreon? Don't use the thing that.
I think the problem with websites like OnlyFans is that what you have done is that you have really established that sexuality is a commodity and that you can sell it. What we have done is we have not only made this a perverse thing for the like no one would have admitted 10 years ago, oh yeah, I bought a prostitute last night. No one would have admitted that. But now people are like, oh yeah, I make OnlyFans. Like they're proclaiming boldly that they're buying and selling. And it's created a commodity that you now shop for like you shop for shoes. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with those websites.
Yeah. I hope that we start seeing a sudden decline, or we start seeing more of a decline. I know that there was talk before the new administration took office that there was talk to try to either put sanctions on Pornhub or straight up ban Pornhub from all browsing sites. Obviously,
why would they do that though?
Obviously, one side was okay with it being a thing, but
that's the thing is that porn in general right now is a $92 billion industry. 12 billion of that comes from America. Like, yeah, and this is also this is crappy to say, but like, if your government probably has more to do with it than you think they do, because there's no way that there's $92 billion are in the world right now coming from porn, and your government has no clue how to stop it. Like 12 billion from America, and the American government doesn't know how to stop it.
Right.
Like they're not.
We know that there's been multiple people that, obviously the most biggest names within not only Hollywood but within political people, names like Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein.
What's coming out now? Now it's coming out because it was hidden so long ago. But here's the thing is that also while we have a rise in pornography and we have a rise in OnlyFans, and that is a bad side of it all, we do now have a rise in victims coming out. And that's actually pretty good because before, like one of the precedents that was before with victims, especially rape victims, trafficking victims, is that the authorities and the public were not trusted. And so when we have a rise in trust and a rise in public outrage right now. One of the things that's really good about this generation, for all of its faults, is that it has social media. So something can happen in another part of the world and you will know about it within an hour. So there is more media coverage, more people have smartphones. So things aren't as hidden anymore, which I think is very good, because now there's really no excuse for not knowing what's happening in the world, for not knowing what's happening in Africa or even our own country. Like, it's at your fingertips. You know this is happening. How many people found out about the Harvey Weinstein? What's his
Weinstein.
name? That dude. Pervy dude. So
Very pervy dude.
Very pervy dude. But how many people now know about that? Would we have known about that in the 60s? Like, as knowledgeable as we are. Like, it has more media coverage, which is amazing about this generation, I think.
Right.
So.
I did want to ask, so how many different human exploitation, or how many different types of human exploitation are there, and how do they work, and like which ones do you think are like the most prevalent and need to be solved? Obviously they should all be fixed and solved in whatever ways they need to be, but like which ones maybe need more focus right now or stuff like that?
I think it's really, so technically there's like 7 different types according to most major organizations, but one of the things I think people focus on is sexual exploitation, which yes, needs the focus. However, sexual exploitation is involved in most of these areas, because wherever there's a female being exploited, chances are there's sexual abuse. So you have to take that into consideration. Sorry, I'm about to cough, so I'm going to take some water.
Water is very important.
Hydrate or dihydrate, kids. So I think, what is I saying? So we have to look at that. We have to acknowledge the fact that there is sexual exploitation. Christy, let me did you spray perfume?
Like 2 minutes ago over there.
Our behind the scenes
I love
is...
you, Dad. Can you go in the other room?
Yeah.
I love you too, Dad. I'm about to die.
Give her a second. She will be okay. We promise.
I am so sorry, guys.
And we're back.
We're back. So I think we have to acknowledge that sexual exploitation and sexual abuse happen in every single part of this industry. So yes, that's a big part. There's a lot of organizations dedicated to that. We also have to acknowledge things like labor exploitation, especially in America. We buy and sell from a lot of different countries that do not have the labor practices involved that we do. And big corporations will go and manufacture, or they'll have factories in other countries because it's cheaper and they can get away with more things. And so we have to be mindful of like where we're buying and selling. Domestic servitude is the big one I think I talked on a little bit earlier, because I talked about the immigrant papers being held, or a lot of coercion through physical threats of violence. You'll have people working in jobs that underpay, or you'll have people working in houses that don't pay. We see this sometimes with nannies a lot too. They are forced inside the house and they're not allowed to leave, and it's barbaric. And then we also have, I think, and especially in America, we have criminal exploitation, or forced criminality is the technical term, where people are forced to do insurance claims, they're forced to do commit fraud through coercion, things like that. And then I think that's the main areas. So that's kind of the main ones. If you're in a different country, child soldiers are probably a thing. If you're in a more of a less regulated country for organ harvesting is a thing, but in America I would say those are probably the main ones.
So those are the ones that are probably the best to
I think those are the ones that you should keep in mind. Yeah,
keep our minds focused on trying to not only be solved, or to be fixed, but to be solved entirely.
Those are the ones I would say, if you are looking for signs, if you are looking to be an active watch, those are the ones that I would say be knowledgeable about. And don't allow compromise. Don't allow somebody to, don't allow your boss to not pay you for time. Do not allow compromise. Do not be silent when you find out that somebody is being treated unfairly and they're a housekeeper, and don't be silent. Find out that they're forced to be in the house. Don't, just because they're your pal doesn't mean you have to be silent. I think that's a big problem we see in America right now, is that it's happening in the elite, and it's happening in the wealthy, and it's happening in these these people that are living on such bare minimum income in general are now being exploited because their income's being threatened, and so we don't say anything because we don't want to cost this person their job, and we also don't want to get this person mad, and there's a lot of that going on.
Do you think with how taxes are being dealt with, by basically where it's difficult because people are like, oh, we need to really super hard tax the rich, but obviously that affects as things get lower, and sometimes you might see those situations where people are being severely underpaid, or sometimes even just completely their jobs get cut out because they can't pay for that kind of stuff. Do you think that kind of falls within the human exploitation side of things, or do you think that's more of just like normal financials and stuff like that?
I think human exploitation is directly, this is me personally, I think human exploitation is directly linked to capitalism, if I'm being very blunt, because why is it okay to sell people? Because there's a demand for it. Why is it okay to charge such outrageous prices for healthcare insurance? Because there's a demand for it. Why, like, these privatizations of healthcare, this even very bad government healthcare has created a demand for privatized healthcare, and it's a capitalist market. Like, it's a capitalist market, and we've created a society, and this is my personal opinion. Mark, you might probably disagree with me on this if we're being very blunt, but like, we've created a society where a human being where there's a lot of people in our world that are put into forceful situations, and they're forced to make hard decisions, like OnlyFans. I know a lot of people that made OnlyFans in the pandemic because they lost their jobs. I know a lot of people that literally, I've met missionaries that are like, oh, I'm going to sell like my plasma. I'm going to sell, and obviously they're selling it, so it's not that bad, and you can sell it now, and it's not coercion, it's not exploitation. I'm not saying that.
It's an optional thing you can do. But
it's this idea of like, let me sell something so I can get some money to live, and I think we've created a society like that, and I think that's a main problem we're seeing overseas too, is people are selling their children because they have zero money.
So, and this is just
we disagree politically, in case you're wondering.
So just a hard take question. Capitalism is the problem.
No. Capitalism is I think that the trafficking system is a direct replica of capitalism. But capitalism itself is not the problem. But you have to admit that the only reason that you can sell a woman and you can buy a boy is because there's someone who wants to buy it. So there's a demand for it. And so when you have a demand, you have a price. It's the same reason that we see like children cost more than adults.
So why does it still happen in other countries that aren't capitalist?
Well, because that's the thing. This is not a government regulated thing. There's no government, except for there's a couple governments, but there's America, or a lot of governments are not saying, oh, it's okay to buy and sell children. No one's really saying that. But that's why it's so hard. This issue is so hard because nobody understands the full scope of it, because you will never have a full and complete number of who's being buying and selling. You will never have that full number. It's impossible. Right. It's a black market thing. It's done in shady places. So this is not a government sanctioned, okay, let me go to the store and buy something, unless you're in Amsterdam or a country like that. But this is something of, it's just a replica of, I think it's a replica of capitalism. It's a model of capitalism.
So you don't think it's caused because of capitalism?
It's not the government, no.
It's not capitalism isn't always the government. It's not our market system that caused it.
No, but I think it is a form of capitalism.
But it's a model of it.
Yeah, it's a form of capitalism. Okay. It is. I would agree.
So basically, our country doesn't need to switch to a socialist country to solve.
I think our government, that's an entirely different subject. That's an entirely different subject, Mark. But
you can ask those questions because we're having a conversation. But and I know we're not going to get to that part. She'll definitely be back because we're gonna have other things to talk about.
We'll have a tangent if you let me on that conversation.
Down the road, we will have more conversations when it becomes more political. With these last 2 minutes of our very much appreciated talk, is there anything you want to add as we are closing?
think, especially because right now, my heart is to talk to the believer, the person that believes in Jesus. I think we have to rid ourselves of the theology, of the practice that has an I relationship with Jesus. In this sense, not that Jesus doesn't love you, not that Jesus is not about you, but your intercession, your prayer times, your worship times should not just be about you. If every worship song is about you, you do not understand the heart of the Father. And that's an interesting, and I know that's not going to get me a lot of love, but here's the thing, is that the heart of the Father is for justice, and the heart of the Father is for the meek and the lowly, and it's for the person that doesn't know him. And so if your entire worship mindset is me, and your entire prayer life is me, and your entire Bible time is me, what you have done is you have created a self-focused kingdom. And what does the Bible say? Your kingdom come, your will be done. And so I would just encourage anyone who's listening, take one worship song out of an entire set and use it as intercession. Use it as prayer. When you read a verse about justice, don't think about the person you hate. Think about what's happening in the world. And I would just say be on watch. Stop being apathetic. This is a real issue. Stop buying from Forever 21. Stop watching pornography, please. That's it.
Is Forever 21 one of those
Forever 21,
bad
okay.
ones?
Y'all, okay, there's an app. It's called Good For You. You can look up any brand and it will give you a list of where it is on a scale from good to not good. It will give you a list of transparency. It will give you a list of labor practices called Good For You. It's an app on Apple. And you can enter in any brand. Forever 21 is one of the worst. Anthropology is a product of Outfitters. They are also one of the worst. Shop ethically.
It's called Good On You.
Is it?
Yes.
Thank you. It's called Good On You. My little assistant over there is helping me out, but it's called Good On You. And I would just encourage you guys, be more knowledgeable. Buy resourcefully. Like, especially with labor practice in America, buy locally. Go to your farmer's market. Buy locally from people. Don't buy from people that you don't know where it's coming from out of country. Because you don't know what their labor practices are. Be responsible with your sourcing of clothes. Be responsible with fast fashion, so that way you're not creating a demand for labor that they can't pay for. Makes sense. Did I say that right? Did I say that right?
I think so.
I think so. Who knows? It's all good. Yeah.
Well, that is, we are we are getting towards the end of our fantastic time with Anna.
What did you learn?
What did I learn?
What did you learn? I'm taking over the podcast.
What did I learn?
What did you learn? I talked a lot.
There is a lot more to this than meets the eye, and people need to be way more educated on it than even the common person like myself, who thought that they were at least semi-educated on it, obviously wasn't.
Well, I'm not. That's the thing. It's like I'm not even fully educated on it. You'll forever be in this mindset of, what more can I do? We also have areas to grow in. I shop from Target, if I'm being honest with y'all. Leave me alone, but I do.
Yeah, there's some, while I would love to be supporting certain things, there's some things in life that it's hard to...
You do what you can.
Yeah, like, I mean, while they try to push it off, like, I just bought a brand new pair of Nikes that are cool because they're recycled Nikes, and I don't know, obviously they weren't made the best, but I needed shoes. Sorry.
You do what you can, and you make the choices that you can. I think that's what it's about. It's a progressing mindset, not a perfect mindset. Okay, how can I be better today? Not how can I be perfect.
Right. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you for watching the Christianity Unfiltered podcast. This has been Mark and Anna. And make sure you hit that subscribe button and the like button, and we will see you later.